Good evening and welcome to I think it's the fifth Gooner, old Git Gooners podcast. All right, so I will get used to the name because for 13 years I was doing the online Gooner podcast, and I got a lovely email earlier today saying they really enjoyed this because it brought back memories of the old Gooner days. So that was nice to read from one of the listeners. However, on to business, and in a funny kind of way, the reason I'm even here goes back to one of the other gentlemen on the call, Mr. Mike Francis, obviously the original, the founder of the Gooner, the original editor, the original publisher, and yeah, handed the reins over to me in the year 2000, but was still kind of, top of the tree, was still running things in the background for a long time. And so, yes, he encouraged us to try this thing called a podcast back in 2007 when there weren't too many of them around. And we kept going for 13 years until Leif Hughes took over. And Mike was actually on the very last of the old style online Gooner podcasts back in, I think, March 2020, just before COVID. So it's nice to see him back. And yes, it's been a few years since I've seen you in this way. No, in a podcast format, I should say, actually. But welcome along to Mr. Mike Francis.
Thanks, Dave.
Next up
Good to be
is
here.
a gentleman who also was heavily involved in the Gooner, and I believe still is, actually. I think you are still writing, yeah.
Yes,
But
I'm. Yes.
more significantly, of course, he writes regularly for The Guardian, specifically the 1980s sports blog. And I was reflecting this morning that actually we're quite fortunate that he contributed to the Gooner gratis. He didn't ask for any money, which hopefully you are being paid by the Guardian. But definitely, I mean, a man for the retro stuff. But I always wonder one day if you're going to move on to the 90s at some point if you run out of material. But time will tell on that one. It is a warm welcome to a person I've only met once in the flesh at the Football Sports Association annual awards when the Gooner bought a table, and I was able to invite a few of the regular contributors to say thanks. So it's a very good evening to Mr. Steve Pye.
Hi, nice to be here.
And fortunately, unfortunately, we had a very late dropout. So we were supposed to be joined by Phil Wall this evening, but he couldn't make it. So at the last minute, I'm very grateful to my flesh and blood, my son, and he's been on the podcast before, so he knows the ropes, and look forward to hearing his views. It is Mr. Frank Whitcher.
Thanks for having me, Dad. I hope I can do a Trossard-esque substitution appearance for you here.
I like it. Good, good fun. Right. So anyway, down to business in hand, and of course, we've actually only had one Arsenal match played since our last podcast was recorded. It was the away draw at Sunderland. It was it was a dramatic game for sure, and it also meant that Arsenal's lead at the top of the table was reduced a little. But yeah, I mean, mixed feelings on that game. Um, I'm going to just start with a question. Are you at all concerned at the fact that Arsenal effectively lost a game, or drew a game that they were winning until injury time? And I'm going to start with Steve Pye on that one.
I think at the time I was deeply frustrated. I started to get slightly concerned, thinking back to last season. Far too many draws last season cost us, the tilt at the title. I think maybe it's just the timing of the equaliser that was the bit that annoyed me the most. I think I was kind of thinking we were going to have a 6-point lead at least going into the international break. But maybe in hindsight, a point at Sunderland, the way Sunderland are playing at the moment isn't too bad a result, considering we've got 6 players out at the moment. But don't like to use that as an excuse. But we didn't have many attacking options to bring on, did we, to try and sort of get a third goal, to be honest. But
Okay. What about yourself, Frank? Do you think that was I mean, do you think Arsenal should have won that game, or do you think 2-2 in the end was actually a fair result?
No, overall, I do think we deserve to win the game. I think you could say we deserve to go 1-0 down. So we deserve to concede for sure. Obviously, I was there in the away end, and the feeling when we conceded was yeah, it was like a dagger because that streak had been going for so long now. But we it was coming, and then second half got back into the game. And I think in those away games, a lot of teams are going to struggle at the Stadium of Light this season. I think in those type of games is where if you get the lead, you can't lose it. And if you're conceding at any point and you come back, take the lead, there's no way you should be, losing that position in the game. So really disappointed not to win that game. And you can imagine it's one of those where the players in the dressing room feels like a loss. But at the same time, they have to pick themselves back up. If you can't lose a game or if you can't win a game, don't lose it. So move on to the next one and yeah, just take the lessons from it. And if you get that opportunity to get back in the game like that, you can't throw it away.
Okay, Mike, Sunderland scored twice against us after the long run where nobody was even getting shots on target. Um, do you think maybe they might have established a blueprint of how to play against Arsenal that other teams might imitate? What did you make of the nature of their goals?
It was certainly a sort of physical encounter. That they threw men forward. They had a lot of physical people. Ballard, obviously ex-Arsenal, didn't do us any favours. Scored a goal, and I think he got the assist on the equaliser as well. Whether it's a blueprint, I think it depends. A lot of teams don't have those sort of players anymore. So I think other teams might struggle, to match that. But they were certainly physical, and we did struggle at times, and that's surprising given, as you say, the defensive fortitude we'd had up until that point. So a little concerning, but prepared to put it down as being a bit of a one-off. The circumstances just going against us. Sunderland playing well at the moment, home crowd behind them, etc. I'm not overly worried. I think, as Frank said, a point might end up being a good result at Sunderland as the season goes on.
Yeah, you can't win them all. That's the reality. But hopefully we will win most of them. We probably need to, but obviously we'll see what happens and whether or not the other teams have just had a blip or they will continue to drop points. But of course, we are now returning from the international break, and we've got 3 challenging matches in a row in 8 days. The first one is, of course, the North London Derby on Sunday. Um, let's start not with the opposition, but the officials, or you could say the other opposition if you believe certain things which sometimes people say. Very interesting appointments, though slightly less controversial one, but all the same not helpful necessarily to Arsenal, is Stuart Atwell on VAR. He was the referee for the Newcastle 1-0 game when the ball didn't go out, reputedly, or Gabriel wasn't fouled in the subsequent cross that led to Newcastle's goal. But more significant, perhaps, is that the actual referee is going to be Michael Oliver. Of course, last refereed at Arsenal when he sent off Miles Lewis-Skelly at Wolves, and was shown to be, well, an amazing decision, which wasn't even challenged by VAR, although it was Darren England at Wolves, not Stuart Atwell. So my question is, do you think Michael Oliver might overcompensate and actually not necessarily give as many decisions against Arsenal as he has historically done? Or do you think we're going to see the same old type of performance, which creates plenty of, shall we say, controversy for at the least? How are you feeling about that, Frank? How are you feeling about Michael Oliver refereeing this match?
Well, at the end of the day, he's always going to ref a handful of games for us every year. It always happens to be in the big ones. I know he's one of the supposedly one of the better refs in the country, but yeah, it does worry me. It does worry me in terms of, he loves to give red cards against us. He's he's given us 7 red cards in 55 games officiated for us, which is 13% of the games, which is very high. So it's one of those where we have to keep our discipline. It's a North London derby. It's gonna be, it's gonna be aggressive. Hopefully, it's gonna be one of those games where tackles are gonna be flying. There's gonna be a lot of physicality on the set pieces and stuff. So yeah, we have to be disciplined in that regard, especially, probably more so in like little smaller details like second yellows and time wasting and throw-ins and corners and those little small bits that we saw at City away when he sent Trossard off for kicking the ball away. So we just need to be disciplined and try and sort of make him a non-factor, and we don't even talk about him at the end of the game because we played so well. So I don't really want to try and think about it too much, but yeah, it does, in the back of my mind, it does kind of slightly worry me.
What do you think Steve Pye is going through Michael Oliver's head ahead of this game? Because, he must be aware that the spotlight's going to be on him.
Well, being paranoid, I'm thinking he's wondering how he can stitch us up again, but hopefully it won't come to that. I'm starting to hate myself slightly because I go on social media and I get tweets saying who's going to be refereeing, who's going to be on VAR, and immediately my heart sinks. And I just think, Michael Oliver, conspiracy theories start coming out because City are back in the title race. So they've sent Michael Oliver to Arsenal, which is obviously ridiculous. But it does worry me. Like Frank said, some of those red cards in the past, the Miles Lewis Skelly one, the Martinelli one at Wolves as well, when he was the one, wasn't he, when he got 2 yellows in the same sort of incident. But part of me thinks, will he overcompensate and help us out? But he doesn't strike me as a man who would do that. He likes to be centre of attention, and I might put £5 on Tottenham getting a penalty, but
Yeah. One thing that I do notice is that the football rules do seem to change every summer. However, they also seem to change mid-season when Michael Oliver is reffing games, and he brings new variations on the rules which I've never seen before. Mike, do you think? I mean, he does seem to give a lot of decisions in matches involving Liverpool and Arsenal, especially when they're playing Manchester City, that would suggest that he isn't completely objective. And yeah, he's a Newcastle fan. Um, I mean, is it coincidence, or do you think there's something murky going on there?
I have to say, I used to think Michael Oliver was one of the better ones. I remember him doing a Man United game, Arsenal Man United at Old Trafford, and he sent off one of their players, or he disallowed a goal. I can't remember which it was. But I remember thinking, good on you, standing up to United at Old Trafford. But since then, he seems to have been making up for it. I hope he overcompensates. I doubt he will. I agree with Steve on that. I'd be astonished. I don't know. I think to Steve's point, you look at who we get appointed every week, and your heart always thinks I'm not sure which ref I want to referee our games. There's always some history that you can refer back to. So perhaps it is just coincidence. But then, the data against Oliver, the number of red cards, as Frank mentioned, he's given against us is way above anything else he's done. It's way above an average. So you do begin to start getting a little bit paranoid and start going, that's not right. I'd like to think that's not the case, but stats say a lot.
Yes, that is true. Certainly, the number of cards he's given Man City proportionally are well, it's remarkable. Let's put it that way. Statistical fluke, let's call it. Let's actually talk about the official opposition then, which is Spurs. Now, I mean, we had a pretty good run against those guys, and we can always thank Ange Postecoglou for that. But things are a little different now. Now, when we played them pre-season, which of course isn't, necessarily a predictor of anything, but Thomas Frank basically set up his team to defend and snatch a win on the break, pretty much. Do we anticipate a similar kind of game at the Emirates on Sunday? And I'll go to you first, Mike, on that one.
Yeah, I think probably do. I think that's the way he's tended to set up a lot of games. I don't think it's just because it's Arsenal. I think that a lot of games they seem to be much more on the back foot than they were under Ange, which, well, maybe that's no surprise. It's one extreme to the other. But yeah, I fully expect them to be 10 behind the ball pretty much all times. I'm not even sure I know who their striker is anymore. They don't seem to have one. I mean, if you unless you count Richarlison, which I don't. So yeah, I'm expecting it to be, attack against defence for most of the game, and hopefully we can break them down. I mean, I watched one of the earlier podcasts a few days ago, and you were actually talking up Spurs. I think it was earlier in the season, and sort of going, oh, Spurs were a bit of a risk. Doesn't kind of feel that way right now, although they're still, I don't know where they are in the league, fifth, sixth, something like that.
Liverpool, I believe. So
Really?
yeah, as are Man United. So it's a weird time.
So I always go into North London derbies nervous and worrying, but probably less so this time than some of the more recent ones.
Okay. Frank, I'm going to ask you about your namesake in a way, Thomas Frank. Do you think these are the early days and that he's going to actually make them better with more time? Or do you think we're just going to see the same old Tottenham, which is a very inconsistent group who can win big games, but can also lose some pretty easy ones?
Yeah, I think when they hired Thomas Frank, I was genuinely a bit worried because they've obviously hired several managers in the last decade and some big hitters, some maybe gambles. But you were never sort of like, I was never sort of fearful of, or maybe they found their guy. And I do really rate Thomas Frank, and I do think long term he's going to be really good for them. Unfortunately, the top end of the Premier League is so fierce and competitive that I, it's hard to see them winning a title even in the next 5 years, let alone maybe even 10 years might be difficult to see that. So, yeah, but I do think they found their man. I do think it's going to be a struggle in the first year, maybe 2 years, um, because they've sort of that squad have been used to a certain style for quite a while. The last couple of years of Ange, and just overall, I feel like the culture is set, and it's kind of it's this revolving door of managers, and even though the players might not be the same as they were under Conte and Mourinho, it's almost like this thing where they just don't have an identity, and I do think Thomas Frank will build that. In terms of the game coming up, yeah, I'm very confident that we'll win. Um, you never know. Form does go out the window in a derby, but I just think Arsenal are so much more committed and dialed in to their identity, and I just think that it would be a shock if we lose. I think they'll have to play on the counter. They'll try and play. I think we'll press them very well, and they'll try and hit spaces, and I think we'll smother them. Personally, if we win, in the small chance that we lose, in my opinion, it will be some sort of counter attack, some sort of 1-0 smash and grab.
Okay. Steve, obviously we are not going to have Gabriel, who has been influential in North London derbies for sure. I'm going to make you Mikel Arteta for 2 minutes, and I'm going to ask you to select the back four for Sunday afternoon.
I quite like his hair, actually, Mikel Arteta at the moment. But those days are gone.
You
Yeah. I don't know. Is Calafiore fit? Do we know?
He's potentially fit, but for the sake of argument, let's
Yeah,
say Calafiore can't make it.
can't make it. So you also got to have Timber at right back and Saliba at centre back. I would possibly go Mosquera as the other centre back, and if Calafiore can't play, then Miles Lewis Skelly at left back. But then Hincapi's been playing quite well. I think he's had a couple of decent performances lately. I don't know. Is he more of a left back Hincapi than a centre back?
Well, he was bought as cover for Gabriel in theory, which is why I asked the question away, because if that is the case, then he should be the natural replacement. But in terms of
toss-up between maybe a toss-up between Hincapi and Mosquera, because Mosquera's impressed pretty much, maybe a little bit shaky at St James's Park, but I think he came on at Anfield, didn't he? He played really well there, and it's not quite like the old days where you're scrabbling around for players. I remember Igor Stepanov's having to step in a few times in the distant past, but even though he did quite well in the 2002 double team, but no, I think it's a toss up between Mosquera and Hincapi for me to come in for Gabriel. So, yeah.
Okay. Personally, I think Hincapi will play left back and Mosquera will play in the centre. I don't know why, just got that feeling, but time will tell. Okay, well, we've got Spurs on Sunday, and then we've got Bayern Munich on Wednesday, and Chelsea the following Sunday. How important is this Bayern Munich game? Back to you, Steve.
I was thinking about this earlier. I was kind of thinking if you could give me 2 wins out of the next 3 games, I'd definitely pick the league games to get the wins in. So that possibly tells you a little bit. If we lose to Bayern, could we still finish in the top 8? Most probably. I would have thought so. Obviously, I don't want to throw games away, but Chelsea away, preparing for Chelsea away, Bayern Munich at home is hardly ideal. So maybe a lot depends on if we do get any bodies back as well, because we could definitely do bodies back. But yeah, it's hard to tell in this new sort of huge league format, and people keep saying that PSG didn't finish in the top section last year and had to play a couple more games, but slightly easier for them because they've got a weaker league, so they can kind of rotate a bit more. But yeah, I think if you said 2 wins out of the next 3, I would definitely take the league games. I'm guessing most people would be the same, but
okay. I mean, on that rotation, Frank, you're a little bit more on the pulse than I am. Which players are forecast to possibly be back either for Spurs or Bayern from the treatment table?
So from the original group that have been out for a while, Noni Madueke, Odegaard, Havertz, and Gabriel Jesus. I don't think I'm forgetting anyone. Maybe I am. Only Gabriel Jesus is in training, so he's been training with the mixed training rather than individual training for the last maybe week. So he could be on the bench potentially for Bayern. I doubt Arteta's usually quite conservative, players coming back from injury. So I doubt he'll, throw him straight back in for the Spurs game. But I think for Bayern, he could be on the bench. And then obviously Gabriel picked up a thigh injury for Brazil at the Emirates, actually against Mexico. So unfortunately, I think he's going to be out for around 4 weeks. So we've lost him, as we know. And then Timber picked up a little gash on his knee, but I think he should be all right. Because the Netherlands social media team posted a picture of him after, and he was had his thumbs up and stuff. So I think he should be fine. And yeah, Gyökeres and Martinelli are the 2 that we don't know much about. Hoping we get them back in time for Bayern at least. I haven't heard much, so I'd be surprised if they're back for Spurs. But this is what we built the sort of squad out for. This is what we've got the numbers in reserve for, and I think now we're really going to show the depth we have, and hopefully the cavalry are coming in terms of Havertz, Noni, and Ødegaard. And yeah, once we have our full squad back, I don't see anything stopping us.
Well, hopefully they do come back, or more to the point, others don't get injured. Calafiori is 50-50. That's the state of him, isn't it? It's not like
Yeah,
it wasn't a major thing, was it? It was just something which meant he couldn't play immediately.
I don't think it was anything huge. I think the Italy manager said it wasn't too bad. I think it was just precautionary.
Okay. I mean, given that, Mike, who would you kind of? I mean, let's just say he starts with a normal 11 he's got from the fit players available. Obviously, Gabriel is going to be replaced, and we don't know about the left back. But let's assume that it's going to be Trossard, Saka, a centre forward. It gets complicated here. I'm thinking, is he actually going to rotate between Spurs and Bayern? Do you think Bayern he's actually going to put in a few of the, shall we say, less regular starters?
It's always hard to predict what Arteta's going to do, isn't it? But he tends to go with the same 11. He tends to go with the strongest 11, apart from Carling Cup games, perhaps. Even then, he can throw in. He plays Saka far more often than I'd like him to. But I don't know. I think it depends a lot on the fitness of the players. Havertz has supposedly had a little setback. I think I read. Gyökeres is the one that we've not heard anything about. I think if he was fit for Sunday, he'd play. If he's not fit for Sunday, but he could make it back for Bayern, then there'd be rotation. Presumably, Marino would then start as the centre forward again. He's done a good enough job up until now when called upon there. But he's still not a striker in my mind. He's still a makeshift. But I think it depends on what options we've got. Maybe against Bayern, Arteta will use that as a sort of almost a comeback game for some of the players. Like Madueke, Martinelli. If they're fit enough, maybe they'll be able to make an appearance in that game and improve their match fitness. And it doesn't feel like it would be necessarily weakening the starting lineup. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens. And then, of course, we've got Chelsea. It's a mixed bag with Chelsea. I mean, they were second until Man City played on. I think they were second until Man City played on Sunday. But it's a very strange table. There's a lot of teams that are actually not that far off Arsenal, but it's whether or not they can put a run together, with the obvious worry being Manchester City, who do look like they might be able to do that and have done before. I mean, one thing that stands in our favour, I suppose, is that we might have these tough matches, but we are actually playing in London, with Brentford being the game after Chelsea, four games in a row. So it's sort of mitigated what potentially is a tough 10 days. But anyway, let's discuss injuries a little further. I remember in 1998 when there was an injury, it seemed like a really unusual thing. So we lost Bergkamp at the end of the season. We lost Vieira for about a month, I think, maybe, after a sliding knee celebration against Manchester United, which every time I now see that down sliding knee celebration, I think, how come they don't get injured doing that? And he did. But maybe it was a hybrid pitch. But there didn't seem to be too many injuries that year when we did the double. And I mean, we didn't have much European football, I don't think. I think we were knocked out fairly early. I can't remember. It would have been UEFA Cup then, I think. But Steve, can you enlighten me? 97, 98. We had
97, 98.
Mönchengladbach.
Yeah. Pike,
Was it?
Pike, Salonic, was it in the UEFA Cup? Bergkamp couldn't fly in the away leg.
And we lost to PAOK Salonika. Really?
Yeah,
In 97, 98? Goodness
I think
me,
so.
well, I'll take it. I think we went out to somebody else, I'll be honest with you. Mike,
I
any
think
memories?
I think we drew one. We lost 1-0 away, and then we drew 1-1 at home. I think they got quite a late goal, but my memory is fading. So Mike, maybe back me up.
I look at my memory. I think Frank's the only one whose memory could be relied on, and he probably was too young then. So.
We need to Google it.
It wasn't. I do have a memory though of the Arsenal Leicester game, the 3-3. Oh no, was it that? No, it must have been another one because that was before his board. It was a game I was listening on the radio, and in the evening there was a late equaliser. I got a feeling it was Leicester for some reason, but it couldn't have been. 97-98 was a 3-3, wasn't it? So
Yeah.
Yeah, must have been another game. But he was 1 year old or something. And I celebrated hearing this equaliser on the radio. It completely freaked him out. He burst into tears. He won't have any memory of that, but it's just for some reason that era brings it all back. But why are we getting more injuries in the modern game? Is it the boots are too thin? What's going on here? Because we didn't used to see all these guys drop out for weeks and months on end. Any theories on this?
Is it just too much football, or nowadays? I don't know. There's more Champions League games. There's players that play a Winter World Cup, didn't they? I know it was a couple of years ago, but some of them haven't had a rest for ages. But
workload
maybe. I don't know if the pitches have changed much since '98. Because are they harder? So players can get muscle injuries. I can't really put my finger on it, but workload is obviously a big part in it, but then the squads are bigger, so you're not going to get a 1979-80 Arsenal 70 game situation where you've got about 14 players, and so I really it's just very frustrating, though, isn't it? We kind of get one player back and then lose another. Yeah,
it is. I mean, is it just Arsenal, or do you think other clubs suffer to a similar degree?
There's definitely more injuries around in general, I think. I mean, we're obviously always going to focus on our ones and be a bit blinkered about it and go, oh, we're getting loads more injuries. And, I remember going back, say, to the 90s, and we always used to say Spurs got all the injuries. Darren Anderton was barely played. I wonder whether as a profession we're just better at diagnosing injuries and seeing them earlier than we were perhaps back then. And players are now more likely to go, oh, my knee's a bit sore this week. I'd better not play because it might get worse. And, maybe they'd play through that before. I think workload absolutely comes into it. There's a bit of me which says, is it the intensity of games? But if anything, I think that's gone the other direction. I don't think that the intensity is quite what it was in some ways. So yeah, it's very difficult to point it to anything specific, but there's definitely more players missing games these days.
Frank, you still occasionally play Sunday League football in the morning, is that true?
Yes.
Now, is injury a thing there?
Yes, although it may just be players too tired because they're hungover from the night before and they can't play a full 90. So yes and no, but yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion. I think Steve and Mike both brought up some good points. I do want to push back a bit on the physicality or aspect, or was it the pace of the game or that kind of thing. Like I personally think with the whole injuries conversation, I think it's like a tug of war, and it's like one side is that, as time goes on, and it's across all sports really, but in terms of football, as time goes on, technology supposedly gets better and better and more advanced. But the other end of the tug of war is all the sort of, how many games there are, and then all the other arguments you'd put forth to say why, all of the injuries are occurring nowadays. But yeah, I do think the intensity is something. I personally do think the intensity is faster. It might not be as sort of physical or violent as it used to be. Some people might call it violent, where the players crashing in for tackles and like different bars for red cards and yellow cards back then. But yeah, I think in terms of the athletes, I'd argue across the board, you might not agree with all these points, but across the board, I'd say, the athletes are better in sports in general today. They might be, you could say they're bigger, stronger, and faster as technology gets better and those things. There's obviously less recovery time between matches, more games, more strain on the body. And it's basically a total war between is the technology good enough? And I think that's why the sort of powers that be are pushing players to play so many games is that they're sort of always pushing the boundaries and seeing as the technology gets better, as athletes as they get better, how much can we get from them? How many games can they play? How much can we test this level of athleticism? So yeah, I think it's a multitude of factors, and I do think there's definitely two sides to the argument. I'd probably argue that the frequency of the games is probably a big thing. Obviously, a lot more international travel, the Club World Cup, all these kind of things, the Nations League, all these new competitions and stuff. I do think that it's causing probably a little bit more fatigue, and that's probably the main factor. But there's definitely a lot of nuanced arguments to be had.
Okay. Um, as we've got Steve Pye here, and you might not remember this in terms of actual
Probably not.
but of course, we do. Well, certainly Frank might not be aware, but the rest of us are aware of the 79-80 Arsenal season. I think there were 70 matches altogether.
Yeah.
So this idea that there are more matches these days is partly countered by the fact of this concept these younger people might not have heard of called a replay. And you could have a lot of them. And Arsenal certainly had a few in 79-80. Do you remember, off the top of your head, if we had injuries to Arsenal players in that season, 79-80, when we did play 70 matches?
I'm struggling to remember a major injury. No, I was going to at one point write a book about that, so I did start researching it, but I never got around to it. But no, I know Brian Talbot apparently collapsed on the coach, didn't he? On one of the after the cup final because he was so exhausted, and then he still had like 3 games to play after that, because he played all 70 games that season, I think. But I can't think of a major one. And I think from my research, if I remember rightly, the only player we brought in was John Hollins potentially. So I don't think we added to the squad very much. And yeah, I'm trying to think who might have stepped in, because there was a famous game, wasn't there, at Tottenham, I think, and we played load of reserve players because it was just before the Juventus semi-final. But we still won. Or drop that in. But no, obviously squad rotation.
So Paul Davis debut, I think, wasn't it, that Spurs game?
Yeah. And I think people like Paul Vasson obviously played in that. And, but I can't remember a major injury. But now I'll probably, after this recording, go home and realise that someone broke their leg. And no, I don't think so.
Yeah. So yes, interesting. Yes.
So I also wanted to add that like I think maybe as well that there's probably a lot more playing through injuries back in the day as well. And I do think that a lot of it probably wasn't reported, and now you've got all these massive physio teams and analysts and stuff like that, and I think they do they sort of, if there's any sort of small injury, everyone knows about it by the next morning. So I do think that's another thing that contributes. And yeah, obviously you raised a good point about replays, and there been a lot of games back in the day as well. But yeah, maybe over like the course of a season the numbers could be similar, but if you were to like maybe from like I don't know the numbers on this, but I'm just assuming that like a player who's like an international player, for example, I'm just thinking in a calendar year, or maybe you could span it 2 years, how many games that international player probably plays for club and country. And I'm almost certain that it's like the better you perform, the shorter your summer is. So if you're in the Champions League final and then you're playing in the Club World Cup, which the PSG players had to do, you're probably partying for 2 weeks, and probably in another 2 weeks you're back, at the training ground. So yeah, I think that there are obviously more competitions nowadays, so there's going to be more games. But it was a good point you raised, and yeah, I think a lot more playing through injuries back in the day as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the situation now, in a way, is that they want to play the players if they can because they're earning so much money and they want to get their value. But it's a delicate balancing act for sure, and occasionally it doesn't work out. So let's just return to the well, basically, we've got three London derbies in the next four matches. Is the fact that there are a lot of London clubs actually beneficial in terms of, yeah, you don't have to travel so much, or a disadvantage because in theory there are a lot of derby matches and supposedly they are more competitive and teams raise their game against their kind of local rivals. Okay, we have our obvious North London derby, but we're playing a lot of other London teams. Let's face it. And there are actually not so many northern teams these days. So the away trips are fewer in terms of distance than we sometimes have to make. Do you think I'm going to give you a straight vote here, gentlemen? Would you say yes, I like it more that we have more London teams in the top flight, or no, I'd prefer it to be a bit more mixed up because, it's perhaps the matches might be less intense. So it's a yes or no vote. And I'm going to start with Mike Francis.
It's a tough one. I mean, I think it's changed a little bit. I'm dodging the question slightly, or giving myself time to make a decision. I think it used to be that a lot of London derbies was detrimental to our chances. I kind of don't feel that the rivalry is quite there with most of the London clubs now. West Ham always used to feel like a big rivalry. It doesn't really anymore. To me, I don't know. Maybe West Ham fans would feel different, but Chelsea, yes, Spurs, yes, everyone else, not so much. So I think there probably is an advantage. I think from a playing point of view, I think there is an advantage to not having as much travel. And I'm saying that having moved further north, and therefore would probably prefer some more games up north these days because it would be a little bit easier for me to get to them.
Okay. Steve, I could see you nodding in agreement there.
Yeah, I agree with everything I said there, really. I think the intensity has gone out of some of the matches, possibly because there's less local lads playing in games. That's possibly one reason. I'd much prefer a trip to Fulham or Brentford than a trip to Stoke in the old days, or Newcastle or Middlesbrough or places like that. And like Mike said, I think our main games are the Tottenham and Chelsea games. I think West Ham possibly see Tottenham as their sort of derby, their cup final. And I don't particularly think Fulham and Brentford and Palace probably raise their game to play us. I'm not too sure about that. So I actually don't think it's too bad an issue, really, playing so many London games.
Frank, do you have a view on this?
Yeah, I have a few points on it. I think number one, well, I have a few good and bad points, but number one on the good is that is definitely helpful with the train ticket prices. I don't have to spend as much as I would if I was having to go up north and south and everywhere all over the countries, even Wales, maybe if Cardiff or Swansea in the Premier League. So that's definitely welcomed. But yeah, I do agree you can get a bit of like derby fatigue. It does get maybe it doesn't feel as special anymore. It also gives rival fans that support teams in London the opportunity to pipe up when they're in the bottom half of the table, and just because we're in the same city, they think we're rivals. But yeah, I think there's good and bad points to it. I think um, you know there's Palace, there's Brentford, there's these away trips that are, I think are really good away days. And, I personally am happy they're in the Prem. But at the same time, I look at, for match going fans, it's quite good to go up and down the country and see different corners of the country. So yeah, I can see both sides to it.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so let's have a look at, as we're on the subject of derbies, good and bad memories of the North London derby. This is obviously the time to reflect and discuss these things. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Mike Francis. Good and bad, one of each.
There's so many good. There's only one particular bad one. I mean, I'm trying to think of home games. There's some good memories we've had at White Hart Lane, obviously, but a home game one that really stood out for me was, and I'm struggling to even think what season it was. It was 96, 97, around that time, was the 3-1 game at Highbury, and Bergkamp got the goal right near the end, crossed to the far post, and he took it down with a beautiful first touch cut inside the Stephen Carr, I think he might have been, smashed it in, and then we got a third goal. I think Adams got a goal in that game. I remember that was just euphoric feeling. I mean, beating Spurs is always euphoric, but that one particularly stands out in the memories. Bad one. I can't get the semi-final out of my head. That still hurts. 91.
Go with it, Mike. It's all right.
I'm trying to think of a bad one at Highbury. I mean, I know there's been a couple. One that actually I saw recently, I saw a clip from recently, was the 4-4 game where Bentley scored from the halfway line sort of goal, and they were 4-2 down with seconds left to play, it felt like, and they got 2 late goals to equalise, and that was hard. That's a hard one to take. I can't remember the circumstances of where we were in the league, but you never wanted Spurs to equalise in the last minute, let alone get 2 in injury time.
Yes, just a point of fact, that was at the Emirates, not Highbury, but yeah.
Sorry, did I say Highbury for that one? Yeah.
The other thing to say is I've got to come in here because it is one of my favourite memories. In that 3-1 game, the second goal was the one that put us ahead. The third was a cherry on the cake. And that second goal, I was right behind it. We took a throw, and Bergkamp just chested it into the path of the onrushing Adams, who scored the most beautiful goal on the half volley. And I just remember it hitting the net and the water coming off the net because it was such a wet day. But it was pure bloody poetry, that game. And it was actually, I think, the moment that we all really fell in love with Wenger, in the respect that, whether or not he did, he seemed to get the importance of the North London derby in some way, because this was his biggest result up to that point, which really mattered to the fans, and the rest is history. But it was a magical November Sunday afternoon. I'm pretty sure about that TV game. Steve, I'm going to go to you as another veteran, and one good, one bad. Doesn't have to be a home game. Doesn't have to be a home game.
No, I did think of obviously Mike said we've had quite a lot of good ones at White Hart Lane, like winning the League Cup semi-final in '87. I was going to pick the 3-1 at home because I think that was the first time I'd ever seen Arsenal beat Tottenham in the flesh, and I was in the North Bank that day, so I had a good view of Tony Adams' goal as well. The 2-5-2s were very enjoyable, so I'm probably having too many choices here. But the bad one, obviously, the semi-final. I played in the cup final that day as a 15-year-old, and we lost 3-1, so that was horrible that day. And there was a 3-2 at home. I think it's our last home league defeat against Tottenham, and we were 2-0 up at half-time. It was 2010-11 around that time. I had to look it up, but I didn't go on YouTube. It's too painful. But and I just remember the horrible feeling when it went to 2-2, thinking they're gonna nick this, and then I had to take the children to go and watch Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the film, and I sat through the whole film, just sat there sulking, and I wanted to go and drink my memories away of that day, but it wasn't a great day. So, but thankfully, many more happy memories than bad. So,
Absolutely, yes. Now, when you were a youngster, Frank, I feel a bit guilty here. Somehow, you ended up watching a hell of a lot of Arsenal matches, either on videotape or DVD. And one of them you used to watch a lot was actually the game after the Invincible season when Arsenal went to Spurs and they won a game 5-4. I remember you watching that about 3 times on video. However, I'm assuming your actual preferences are going to be a little more recent in this respect.
Yeah. I fun enough, I do remember that slightly. I remember watching the Invincibles DVD on repeat. But yeah, my favorite. So I have a couple contenders. I have a couple honorable mentions because technically wasn't really there to watch these moments happen. But as an Arsenal historian, I think it's worth me shouting them out. So obviously the Henry goal, the solo goal at Highbury, and winning the league at White Hart Lane. Just being able to say that for me, I have to mention that one. But in terms of one that maybe I actually saw or I was there for, it has to be, I believe it was last season, maybe I'm wrong. Um, but when we were 3-0 up at halftime, it's more of a moment. It's not really the result or the game. It was the feeling of being 3-0 up at halftime at the Tottenham Hotspur Spurs Stadium. You know, we'd beat them before, but to be dominating them that badly, um, that was like a very special moment. It felt like euphoric, and then it all came crashing down in the second half, and we almost gave it away. But it's the moment that I'm talking about. And in terms of a bad moment, it would have to be the Rob Holding. I believe it was a penalty he gave away. Got sent off as well in the process, I believe. And just being, I think we were 2-0 down at that point, and just having 10 men against Spurs in their new stadium, hearing their fans absolutely loving it. That definitely was a tough one. I was watching that one at home. Um, so yeah, that's probably the worst one in recent memory, at least.
Yeah, it certainly was a bad day that one. But you were at least alive for the Henry goal and also the title win, which was our second at White Hart Lane. I don't know if you realise we won it there in '71 as well.
Yeah,
Although
I'm an Arsenal historian, so I know that. I know that. Yeah.
yeah, good to hear. I'll quiz you on the 30s team next time you're on then in that case. But I'll find out about that. So on the off-field matters, the club have announced that the sponsorship deal with Rwanda will conclude at the end of this season. Did you ever think deeply about this? Did it ever trouble you? I mean, obviously there have been vocal protests against it, and we know the reasons why. But ultimately, they are still sponsoring, I believe, I think it's Real Madrid, possibly Bayern Munich, certainly the LA Rams, I think, which is a Kroenke team. But Arsenal have decided to part ways, and presumably they will get as good a deal with somebody else as they did with Rwanda. Um, is it important, this stuff? Do you think it actually matters? I'm going to go to you first, Steve.
um, probably ashamed to say I don't really know enough about the ins and outs of whether it was a good or bad thing. To be honest, it probably should matter if it's obviously if it is a bad thing, which sadly I don't know if it is. Then I don't think the club should be getting sponsored by something dodgy. To be honest, so it'd be interesting to know if the decision was because of the protests, because of pressure by anyone, or whether they're just moving in a different direction and they've got a better deal somewhere else. But I think it should matter personally, and yeah, like I say, I'll probably not in a position to comment about whether it was a good or bad deal in the first place, but it should matter. I think, our reputation as a club, sometimes I sort of lecture the likes of Man City fans for doing certain things and buying titles and cups and bits like that, and having owners in slightly dodgy countries. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about it really. I unfortunately can't comment fully, but yeah, it should be something that we as a club look into, obviously.
Okay. Frank, you have an opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I've sort of thought about extensively, but yeah, I'm not really a fan of it. I don't think it's, I mean, I'm not sure what the deal is, but I don't know how worth it is for the sort of, I don't know how much it's worth the commercial side of it when you think about the reputational side of it. And I think even just I don't really like the visit this place sponsorships on any jerseys. I think there's basketball, football. I don't think it looks that good, and I also think it feels kind of forced. It doesn't feel natural. Um, and obviously when you think about all the stuff around Rwanda and the human rights abuses and those kind of things, if you have Visit Rwanda on your shirt, that's saying that to everyone that looks at the shirt. And if some people sort of aren't maybe that wouldn't be accepted there, or there's certain things going on there what's being reported. I don't think it's something that should be on our shirt. When people see Arsenal, they shouldn't see a visit anywhere, in my opinion. But yeah, there's obviously been a case in the past. Other teams have maybe had slightly criticized or slightly murky sponsorships. Obviously, like Steve mentioned, certain owners are from countries with certain murky histories. But I do think when you say visit a place, I think there's even more responsibility on Arsenal. And overall, I'm not really a fan of it.
Okay. Mike, I'm going to ask you a slightly different take on this, which is that in history, Arsenal once had a sponsor which translated into Italian wasn't a good look. Can you recall what it was?
Any
If you
testament.
can't, you can't, I will reveal, or maybe Steve knows.
Was it Sega? Was it
It
Sega?
was Sega.
It
Yes,
was
it was.
Sega. Yeah. I won't say the word, but it's too rude.
Well,
But
uh, I will spell it for
yeah,
Mike's benefit. In Italian, apparently it translated as WANK. So we were wearing that on our shirts for a couple of seasons, I think. But yes, it was a very interesting choice. But then again, the game wasn't quite so international at that time, so we probably weren't. Might have been laughed at a little bit, but we seem to have survived. So that's that. I think now I've really got one more topic which I haven't really covered, and we are almost out of time, so I will do it briefly. Um, how did you feel a few weeks ago when all the pundits, and I think they are kind of starting to withdraw now, were saying it's Arsenal's title to lose? The title race was already over. Um, did you take it as uh, a compliment, or did you think, for God's sake, why are they saying this after 8 games? You know, 10 games? What has got into their heads? Um, I mean, it looks a bit daft now, to be honest, because we've only got a 4 point lead. But Steve, did you enjoy hearing that? Did you enjoy it when people were saying that?
no, you can't hand titles out after 8 games or 11 games. It's just ridiculous. It's and then we drop points at Sunderland, and then all of a sudden it's old Man City are on Arsenal's tails, and it's just the way of the modern sort of world. It's clickbait. It's just nonsense, really. And I think if City do win the league and we come second again, people abuse it with a sort of stick to beat us with and say, "Oh, Arsenal thrown it away again," and it's just boring. And I'm trying to avoid as much of it as I can. I try and avoid Talk Sport and Sky Sports nowadays and social media because it just drives me around the bend. Because it's just the same old people saying the same old stuff. And I remember when we scored the last minute winner at Newcastle, and Gary Neville's going, teams that win the league will score from this sort of corner, and we scored. And then I think he was probably upset that we did score, to be honest. But But I just think it's fairly lazy. And like I say, if we drop points against Tottenham, or we drop points against Chelsea, it'd be Arsenal are going to bottle it again, and so just it's too early and it's very boring.
I think in Gary Neville's case, he actually is an Arsenal fan this season, just simply because he really doesn't like Man City or Liverpool, and it's a lesser of three evils for him. But there we are. Mike, I mean, do you actually entertain this stuff, or do you just, like Steve, turn the damn television off when they start talking about this kind of stuff?
Turn it off. It's all hyperbole, isn't it? It's like Sky just want to make every game a title decider. From even when we played Liverpool, going, it was the third game of the season, and they're bigging it up, going, well, this could maybe play such a huge top role in the title, and you're going, you're 3 games in, for God's sake, and you saw it. I mean, you saw it with that particular game. We lost. Liverpool were clear. Everyone's going, oh, Liverpool going to run away with it. And, 4 games later, they're 5 points behind us. And it's ridiculous to sort of say that at this stage of the season. Any time before March, it's crazy, really. I think you and I probably remember, I think I probably have to take the blame for it. It was the 2008 season. We beat Blackburn at home, and we had to make a decision on the front cover.
Just if you can.
I missed that.
Catch us if you can was the
That's
phrase.
The one, yeah. We'd beaten Blackburn. We had to make a decision on the front cover that night.
Yes.
And we went with Catch Us If You Can, and by the time the issue came out, we'd been caught. So,
it wasn't. We weren't caught, but we were not 8 points clear.
It felt like it. It's like it was all going wrong. But
fun enough.
Yeah, so it's ridiculous, and I think, as Steve said, it's just lazy journalism generally.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I mean, Frank, I'm going to give you a different question. Okay, I'm going to say you've got a £10,000 bet. All right, and you're going to pick the winner of the title in May 2026. All right. So you're going to make good money here. You're going to double your money. All right. Who are you picking now?
Yeah, I've spent that whole time thinking about what I was going to say to the other question. So you really put me on the spot here. But if I was in that position, I would honestly bet Arsenal. And at the end of the day, you can't be certain, you've got to pick one team. But for some reason, I'm pretty quick to say Arsenal. I just think that's because I can't make as compelling a case for Liverpool or City. I don't think anyone else can challenge for it out of those 3 teams anyways. But yeah, I just think even like I'm saying now, even with the injuries and the players that can come in, how strong we are, how much I think Arteta is such a great manager. He's still improving as well. Looking at January, there's some news on Semenyo potentially being available, which is exciting me. Yeah, I think we're the strongest. I think we're the strongest of the 3 teams. And yeah, I think if I was to bet that money, which I wouldn't, I would put on Arsenal.
Okay, and did you have any thoughts about the actual question? Because if you were thinking of any,
I was gonna say that it also slightly frustrated me, but not because I was worried about the pressure it was putting on. It's just because I knew where I was coming from. It's 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 purely just to set themselves up for when Arsenal eventually drop points. They can, like what Steve was saying, they can go and say, "Oh, Arsenal bottled it." They just do it to set themselves up. It's like a skit show. It's like a sitcom. They just want to set up for the next episode and just yeah they just it's just entertainment. That's all it is these days. It's just entertainment. Jamie Carragher was trying to defend ex player pundits and say they're worth listening to and those kind of things. They're not. They're purely there for entertainment and yeah, you've just got to try not to get worked up about their clear tactics and exactly what they're trying to do.
Okay, wonderful. Well, on that note, we've been going for just over an hour, so I'm going to conclude matters just for people's information. I am in a place this particular week which has got very poor Wi-Fi. I might have cut out during this broadcast, but fortunately I wasn't recording it. So I'm now going to say goodbye and ask Frank to hit the stop record button.